All right, welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom. And with us, David Gerard, author of Attack of the 50-Foot Blockchain, Bitcoin, Blockchain, Ethereum, and Smart Contracts. David, thank you so much for joining us from London tonight.
Hello.
I'm really glad to have you on particularly because there's a lot of books on Bitcoin that are very worth, I think, people's attention. The David Columbia book, which we were discussing a little bit pre-recording, which is about the sort of right-wing sort of infestation or, I guess, sheen or fundamental right-wing nature of Bitcoin, shall we say, and cryptocurrency. Your book, and you can amend that characterization if you want. Your book, what I like about it, though, is it directly addresses technological aspects of Bitcoin and crypto, such as the blockchain or smart contracts, that I think can serve as sort of flypaper to attract people who actually genuinely want a better world. And so I just want to say thank you for your book. And if you want to add anything to that characterization of your work.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin isn't about the technology. The technology is it's the hand waving, it's the MacGuffin. It's the selling point. Oh, don't worry about it. It's very complicated. You wouldn't understand it. Just give me the money and it'll be great. But it's all about psychology. It's all about people and the flows of cash, you know.
Right.
Like, I mean, I wrote the book just making fun of this stuff because Bitcoin was invented by annoying internet libertarians who I had considerable experience of. And if those guys invent something, it's going to be comedy in certain ways. So it was comedy in all those certain ways. Basically, when you have people who are pretty smart and are absolutely certain they don't need to research anything, that from their own intellects, they will come forth with a work of genius because they are the smart guys. The world is a simplified version of front-end JavaScript. If you know that, you've got everything. That's who wrote Bitcoin. Economics, well, I read this web page about gold and I think I can adapt it, that sort of thing. It's that species of thinking. Yeah, like when I wrote the book, I mean, I knew I'd have to cover Bitcoin's libertarian origins. Now, they were very sincere people. They were wrong, but they weren't charlatans. You know, they were sincere ideological libertarians who wanted a better world where governments didn't control money and business was free. So they invented this thing, and what was I going with that? But basically, it's, as Columbia's book says, it's the California ideology. It's this sort of melange of what happens when you get sort of hippies who get money for being good at technology, and they have a lot of just world fallacy, and they're convinced that their own genius means they deserve all this. And from that, we get transhumanist, Silicon Valley startup culture, the less wrong rationalists, Bitcoin, neo-reactionaries. They all come from the same sort of area in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
It's wild. And
right.
They use words in ways that aren't actually English. They're sort of specialist jargon. They never tell you they're using the jargon. So people who think, gosh, I'd like a better world, perhaps this thing that's a trustless mechanism out of the control of the oppressor, this will do things for my purposes. I mean, I remember an interview with Columbia where he said that something like he watched people, social activists, get into blockchain because they wanted to make the world a better place. And they transmuted into talking about conspiracy theories and international bankers with 3 brackets around it, right, and worrying unduly about how their altcoin portfolio was doing. So, you know, you see a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So, and I think we're sort of on board with all of that. Now we have occasionally, so I got actually a question here from somebody. It says, maybe Bitcoin ultimately serves, it says capital accumulation, but its use as a peer-to-peer system is useful for the global poor. Now, and you know, so the first question, what is this promise of a peer-to-peer payment system? We hear the word decentralization thrown around, which is, we've said on the show, if this was 30 years ago, they would have just said privatization, it seems to me, but that's discredited. But like, what's the promise of a peer-to-peer system? Because like, to me, it seems like it'd be nice to just like the innovation that I've experienced is I forget the app that you can just pay your friends through your own bank online. I'm blanking on the name right now,
With
but Zelle or something like that. But like, that's not really what's the extra peer-to-peerness that Bitcoin promises?
So that's important because the things that Bitcoin promises are not unreasonable, like cash. We know how cash works. You have money. Like, you don't need to go to your bank to give someone a £5 note, you just give it to them. I bought you a drink, give me some money. Okay, here you are. That sort of peer-to-peer sort of thing. We have computers now. What if we could do that on computers? So the problem with computers is computers are copying machines. Cut and paste, you can make a copy of things. So the way we do digital cash now, and this system works really well in the UK, is it's all centralized, and it's basically your card is a gateway to your bank account. That's money. It feels like money. People treat it as money. It's good for buying things with. It's not so good for giving people money. It's bad for that. It's actually really bad for that. It's great for being a consumer. So what if we could do it with peer-to-peer? This is not a wrong thing to want, right? It's perfectly reasonable. So, and of course, it'll keep governments out of your eyes. Who wants the government looking over your shoulder? Governments are frequently wrong and stupid. These are not wrong things to want. The trouble is that this was all done by wild ideologues, a technological version of anarcho-capitalists, the gold bugs, Austrian economics in its formalized form. And they had very odd ideas, and some of them were really horrible people. Some of them were not so horrible. Some of them were quite nice apart from that, They wanted something that would have money that was out of government control. Now, what this really meant was they didn't want to be taxed.
Right.
Because there's nothing more evil than tax, So, yeah, and that's not a wrong thing to want, but, it turns out that taxes pay for things. So it's a tricky one. You had a lot of these dreams, and they were spoken of in glowing terms, but when you dive into the ideology, you realize it's barely reskinned gold bugs and banker conspiracy theories. And that's not so great. A lot of Bitcoiners don't know that this is the origin, but it literally is. Like, it's really well documented.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had Bitcoiners have no sense of history, right? They're very ahistorical. That's basically because there's a sort of turnover in Bitcoiners like every 6 to 18 months, because they lose all their money and they disappear, and a new bunch come in. So they'll react with outrage, saying, "What? How dare you call Bitcoin libertarian?" Read a book. It's like the only ones who remember the history these days are the critics.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and meanwhile, we're like kind of living history now, because I think that kind of brings us to what today is going on in El Salvador. Which Nayib Bukele basically proving a lot of these theses. So today we have him. Yesterday he changed his bio to a dictator of El Salvador, and today he's saying, "We just bought the dip. 150 new coins. El Salvador now holds 700 coins. #Bitcoin." What's your commentary on Bukele?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So Nayib Bukele is a populist president. Imagine a much more on the ball and more coherent Trump, like much more coherent than Trump was at 40. I don't like what he does or how he does it and what he wants to do, but he's very smart and capable. He is genuinely very popular because he spent a lot of money on public spending. Trouble with that is that El Salvador's currency is the US dollar. So he can't print money. In fact, the people are very suspicious if there was any sign of him printing money, because by long experience, they don't trust governments with printing money out of thin air. It never ends well. So they actually use another country's currency, because the currency of the US is quite a strong economy. It's the world reserve currency already. And so that's what they use. Now, Bukele has to get his money from somewhere. he's been borrowing it on the international bond markets, sovereign debt. The bond traders have no faith in him. The Salvador bonds are they're very discounted. That's what bond traders do when they don't have faith the country will pay back the money. And so he's messing around with financial plumbing in this way. And that people are worried because he's a very impetuous sort of guy. He's the sort of guy who says something off the top of his head, then makes it policy. So like there was a thing about how they'd be mining Bitcoin using volcano power because El Salvador has a lot of geothermal. They're quite good at it. There's about 25% of their power. The rest they ship in. And so electricity is quite expensive there. He was on a Twitter Spaces call with a bunch of Bitcoiners. They were talking about Bitcoin. He just dialed in. And they saw his Twitter handle and went, Mr. President, sir. And they thought, yes, hello, sir. We are so happy to see you. You know, because who doesn't, what freedom-loving libertarian would not welcome a quasi-wannabe dictator?
It's been very revealing.
I will say in fairness, there's a lot of libertarian Bitcoiners who are very pissed off about this and not happy about the El Salvador thing. They're not happy how it's gone. A good example, there's a Twitter to follow, Mark Falzon. Mark with a C. He's a very sincere libertarian crypto guy. He went to El Salvador to see how this was going. He thinks it's been terrible, and he's been just documenting what's been happening there.
Right.
So yeah, he's a good example of a sincere Bitcoiner who is not happy at all with this stuff. So it's not all Bitcoiners at all. Moving close. Just too many of them. Yeah. So Bukele has to come up with money from somewhere. I think his plan is to somehow print dollars or dollar equivalents using Bitcoin as the excuse. His brothers, Ibrahim, Yusuf, and Kareem, like the Bukele family, they're basically an unofficial cabinet, functionally. They all stick together. He consults with his brothers. He's the boss, but he does listen to them. But they're big coiners. And I think he listened to their pitch and thought, I can use this. Because the one thing he needs is dollars. Salvador's income, its national GDP is about 1/4 remittances sent by Salvadorans living in the US. Like, go to Salvador, get a work permit, work in the US, send money back. And there's a lot of smart, educated Salvadorans and so on. Like, I get all these techies calling me with what's been happening, that sort of thing, who send back money this way. So he really wants to get his hands on those dollars because he needs actual dollars to pay the debts with. So if he can get actual dollars in from the US, from remittances, keep the actual dollars and distribute dollar equivalents inside a payment system, then maybe he thinks that can solve his problem. This is surmise, but it's widely held surmise and it fits the facts.
So, and it just should be noted too that like one of the big selling points that he made, and then also a lot of defenders of Bitcoin, is that it's going to make remittances, more affordable for folks, right? That there'll be less money taken off the top, but that's not been the case, correct?
Remittances to El Salvador are quite competitive and quite cheap. They're like a few percent. Now, the way he set this up is to have his system, which he's called Chivo. It's basically a payment system. It's like if PayPal had ATMs and access points and so on, you put dollars or Bitcoins in, they're a balance held on accounts, they're liabilities that Chivo has to you, that sort of thing, So if you get the Chivo app in the US, the idea is that you can put dollars in the US, they come out the other end in El Salvador, the government subsidizes the cost. Now, Chivo is a bit of a wasted opportunity. Speaking in my finance hat, I mean, my Bitcoin stuff, I used to cover tech a lot more, but increasingly the story is just the people and the flows of cash. All the technology is old, put together in some interesting ways. It's mostly interesting documenting how it fails. But so you can imagine the idea of an electronic payment system is it gets the money moving faster, more economic activity, increased country's GDP, which is the sum of flows of cash, not of cash itself. That could be a good thing, you know.
Mhm.
The number one problem is building up trust.
Mm.
Like, I'm in the UK where people have faith that banks aren't just going to steal their money, because we know the deposit schemes work because they had kicked in during the financial crisis and actually everyone got all their money back. We know the government isn't just going to up and steal our money. They'll tax the hell out of us, but they won't steal it, you know. And it took 10 years for our touch card system to work, to get really popular. Like 2007, it was introduced. 2012, they pushed it hard. By 2017, it was more popular than cash. But it took time. I didn't trust it when it came out. I was keeping my card in a little tinfoil wrapper, you know, because I knew that you could skim NFC cards from 3 meters away. But they showed the system was actually trustworthy, that they would fix problems and thefts, and that it would all be good. So, you know, it worked. It had to build up trust. A payment system in Salvador, they're starting from people who use physical cash, don't trust banks, don't trust the governments, but they do trust that US dollars are worth something. How do you make that electronic? You'll have a lot of work, and trust will be job number one. So basically, the Chivo system doesn't work. Like, they tried doing a whole new payment system in 3 months, starting from nothing. My day job's in IT. I know about computers. You literally can't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You cannot do a system in 3 months. It will break. With payment systems, people are very particular about money. You know, they will not take messing around or breakages or problems.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be perfect. You need to do small scale pilot systems, make sure things scale, make sure they work, and so on and so forth. You know, the obvious things.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people get really seriously upset. So, yeah, he did everything completely wrong, such that Salvadorans not only curse the word Bitcoin, they're probably going to curse electronic payment systems in general.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that there are certain Bitcoin proponents upset about that, because that's really shameful, sort of to glom on your project that you're boosting onto a country that actually needs to do some stuff about like banking, and just have a, you know, a sort of Elon Musk type figure or something run it into the ground.
But I mean, they say this banking the unbanked thing, that's been a buzzword in Bitcoin since about 2013.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And like, that isn't actually a problem that crypto can solve in El Salvador, because the biggest problem in the modern world of banking the unbanked is documentation, like enough to pass the money laundering authorities, which isn't ideal, but it's the business climate that we have. But in El Salvador, they've got a national ID card. Every adult's got one. Like, you can get a bank account just with your ID card. And even then, only 30% of people have bank accounts, because they don't see a need, it's too expensive, they haven't got money, or something like that. You know, that's not a problem that adding Bitcoins is going to do anything about, because the problem is making them want it and want to use it and see use cases for it.
Right.
I mean, I just wanted to add to that too, because like, again, like, yeah, the buzzwords about like banking the unbanked and like plugging people into the financial system is such a huge part of, you know, let's say like the kind of left or progressive side of the Bitcoin proponents, right? It's like, we're going to do something for like the poor in the third world. But as you're saying, like, you know, oftentimes these problems are much more, I mean, they're much more specific to like different regions, you know, just like how rural places are, technology access and things like that, instead of it just being one kind of, oh, it's like nobody's ever thought of trying to do digital payments in another society before, right? It's like, you know, that's been tried many a time and people don't adopt it. Yeah. So then tying it to, you know, an asset like Bitcoin on top of it also just muddies the entire process as well.
It's just been a crypto buzzword. In my other book, Libra Shrugged, about Facebook, they were going to do literally this thing. And the thing is, Bitcoin has started, I mean, banking the unbanked is a phrase in international development. It has been for decades. I mean, really, it's saying that we've made a problem where people must have a bank account to live, and oops, some of them can't. I guess they're just poor, and they need motivational skills or something, you know. Right. But Bitcoin has said, oh, we can solve this. We'll use Bitcoin. It'll bank the unbanked. Literally zero of them have ever come with a full worked out plan for this. Zero in 8 years. Facebook didn't come up with one either. Like, I mean, I put the chapter on banking the unbanked. It's on my website, it sets out the problem and how they absolutely did not solve it. You can't just add a new currency. It's all a lot of on the ground work showing people why they need this thing.